Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. What you're about to hear isn't loud. It doesn't explode, scream, or crash. But it stays. It's the kind of story that whispers to you at 2 a.m. when the world is asleep and your chest won't stop aching. It all started with a noise. Not a scream. Not a slammed door. Not a moan. It was a paper fold. The soft crack of a letter being opened. She stood in the hallway, barefoot, eyes still sleepy, wrapped in the same robe she wore the night before. Her hand trembled just slightly as she unfolded the letter I left for her. She thought it was a note about breakfast, maybe a reminder to feed the dog. It wasn't. The letter had no accusations. No insults. Just truths. Every one of them. Stacked like dominoes. And she read them in order. I know. That was the first line. Not, I'm hurt. Not, I'm leaving. Not even, how could you? Just. I know. She didn't sit. She didn't cry. She didn't call my name. She just stood there. Silent. And I watched from across the street through the gap in the curtains of a neighbor's guest room, heart pounding, hands shaking around a cheap thermos of instant coffee. It was raining that morning. The soft kind of rain. The kind that makes everything seem cleaner than it really is. And as she stood there holding the paper like it burned her, I remembered every moment she looked me in the eye and lied. Every, it's just a coworker. Every, don't be insecure. Every, you're imagining things. The thing is. She had no idea I knew. Until the letter. She had no idea I had followed her that night. She had no idea I had been in the room downstairs while she whispered things into his ear upstairs. She had no idea I had heard everything. Because I never confronted her. Never raised my voice. Never broke anything. I wrote. And what I wrote in that letter made her knees buckle. But the real question is. What did I hear that night that changed everything forever? There's a strange kind of pain that comes with hearing your own name, said by someone you love, while they're with someone else. I never meant to hear it. I wasn't looking to catch her. I wasn't following her with a camera or recording device. I just came home early. That's all. The power had gone out at the office due to some electrical issue, so I left midday. Picked up a coffee, thought maybe I'd surprise her with lunch. It had been a while since we'd had anything close to a real moment, and I was holding on to anything that resembled normal. Or hope. When I opened the front door, the house felt strange. Like it had just exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Everything was quiet, too quiet, like the walls were listening. I stepped inside, set the food down, and that's when I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laugh. Hers. The real one. The kind that tilted her head back a little. The kind I hadn't heard in months. It was coming from upstairs. I froze. Not because I was suspicious, but because I was confused. She told me she was going to the gym. She even left the house in sneakers. And here she was, home. Laughing. With someone. I should have called her name. I should have made a noise. I should have walked right out. But I didn't. I moved toward the staircase like I wasn't in control of my own legs. Like I was watching myself from the outside. I stopped at the bottom, because the next thing I heard shattered every rational thought I had. She said my name. Not calling for me. Not in guilt or panic. She said it while joking with him. She said something like. He still folds my laundry by color. Like he's some kind of puppy trying to impress me. And then she laughed again. So did he. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I think I even stopped breathing. There's no way to describe what it feels like when your reality crumbles in one sentence. I felt like a character in a novel that the author just decided to erase mid-page. My knees weakened. My mouth went dry. I gripped the railing like I was holding on to the last thread of my dignity. Then she said something worse. Sometimes I feel sorry for him. Like, it's not that he's a bad guy, he's just not a real man, you know. He's soft. Emotionally. Physically. He wouldn't even know what to do if he caught me. That's when the guy replied, then let's give him something to find, huh? I left before I heard anything else. I don't know how I got out of the house without them hearing me. I remember grabbing my keys, leaving the takeout on the counter, and driving around for 2 hours. I parked behind an old gas station for at least 30 minutes, just shaking. Like I'd been dipped in ice water and left out in the cold. And then, I went back. Not inside the house. Not even to sleep. I went to a motel 2 towns over. The clerk looked at me like I was hiding from something. Maybe I was. And that's where I started writing the letter. But I didn't just pour my pain onto the page. No, I made it methodical. Calm. Almost detached. Because I knew that was the only way it would hit. She wanted strength. She wanted silence instead of softness. She was going to get it. Every word I wrote was a truth she thought I'd never figure out. Every sentence was a mirror I'd hold up to her, so she could see herself, fully, clearly, for the first time. And when I left that letter on the nightstand the next morning and walked out of the house barefoot, with only a duffel bag in my wallet, she still had no idea I knew everything. But by the time she read that letter, she'd know. There's something oddly peaceful about knowing you've been fully broken. No more confusion. No more doubt. Just a cold, quiet clarity that settles over everything. That's how I felt the morning I placed the envelope on the nightstand. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't shaking. I was just, still. As if all the emotions had passed through me and drained out completely. The motel checkout was at 11 a.m. I woke up early, drove back before sunrise, parked at the far end of our street, and walked home like a ghost. Everything looked smaller. The house, the porch, the front door I'd opened 1,000 times with hope in my heart, it all felt like a stage that had seen its final performance. I wasn't planning on staying long. Just enough time to leave the letter in plain sight. When I stepped inside, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, it warns. She was still asleep upstairs. I could hear her breathing. Slow, calm, content. I didn't go up. I didn't want to see her face. I just walked into the bedroom, set the envelope on the nightstand right next to her phone, and took one last look around. Her robe was on the chair. Her heels were still by the closet. Nothing out of place, except me. I was already gone, emotionally. The man who used to live in this house had been erased the night he stood at the bottom of those stairs and heard his wife mock his name between kisses from another man. I locked the door behind me when I left. Not out of spite, but habit. I had nowhere to go, really. I wasn't ready to tell anyone. I wasn't strong enough to explain. So I drove around again. Ended up back at the same gas station. Sat in the same parking spot. Drank terrible vending machine coffee and watched strangers fill their tanks while their lives stayed whole. It wasn't until 3:47 p.m. that she texted. Just one message. No, where are you? No, why did you leave? It said. Lowell, please tell me this isn't real. I didn't reply. Half an hour later, she called. I watched it ring. Didn't answer. The voicemail icon popped up almost immediately. I didn't listen to it. Not then. Not for a long time. She called again. And again. By 6 p.m., there were 6 missed calls and 2 new voicemails. And that's when I knew she had read it. The letter wasn't long. But it was surgical. I didn't beg her to explain. I didn't ask for apologies. I simply told her I knew. That I had hurt her. That I had seen her. That every excuse, every cover story, every fake smile over dinner, I had filed them all away like evidence in a trial she didn't know she was on. I told her the worst part wasn't the affair. It was that she pitied me while I was loving her fully. That she saw my gentleness as weakness. That she let someone else touch her while I was at home knitting her birthday gift. I ended the letter with this. You said I wouldn't know what to do if I ever caught you. You were wrong. I walked away. That was it. By the time the sun set, she had sent 5 more messages. Her tone shifted in each one. The first was denial. The second was panic. The third, defensive. The fourth, desperate. The last one said, "Please, can we talk? Just once." I didn't mean all of it. I was confused. It wasn't real. But it was. And what she did next told me everything I needed to know about how much of her regret was real, and how much was just fear of being exposed. Because the next morning, I woke up to a call. Not from her. But from him. And what he said to me changed the story completely. I didn't recognize the number. Just a generic local area code. If it had been her, I wouldn't have picked up. But something about the timing, something about the pure silence of the motel room and the way my heart was already pounding before the phone even rang, made me answer. "Lowell," the voice said. It was him. Not a guess. Not a hunch. I knew the second he spoke. The voice was too confident. Too smooth. The kind of voice that had probably sold luxury cars or closed backroom deals. And it said my name like we were on a first-name basis. I stayed quiet. "I know you don't want to hear from me," he said, "and honestly, I wouldn't want to hear from me either, but I need to explain something before this all gets worse." Worse? Worse than hearing your wife laugh about you in another man's bed? Worse than watching her read your goodbye letter from a car across the street? "You have no idea what she's been telling me, man," he continued. "I didn't even know you were still together. She said you were separated. Said you were just roommates now. She said you weren't even sleeping in the same room anymore." I wanted to hang up. I should have hung up. But I didn't. Because part of me, some bruised, trembling part of me, still wanted to believe I hadn't been completely erased. That maybe this guy was just a symptom, not the disease. He kept talking. "She told me you were struggling. That you didn't work full-time. That you were kind of, I don't know, emotionally unreliable." He hesitated. "She made it sound like she was the only one keeping things together." I could barely breathe. "She never said your name until that night," he added. "The night I first stayed over. She told me you were out of town. Said it was finally safe to be together. And then she made tea and talked about how hard it was to be the strong one in a marriage with someone who was too soft to stand up for himself." His words hit like a belt to the ribs. I hated how accurate they were. "I'm not saying this to justify anything," he said. "I know what we did was wrong. But she lied to both of us." I finally spoke. "She didn't lie to both of us," I said, quietly. "She knew what she was doing. I was just the only one who believed her while she did it." He paused. And then asked the one question I didn't expect from him. "What are you going to do now?" It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even curious. It was nervous. And that's when I realized, he was scared. Not of me. Of the truth getting out. Because if he had only just found out the truth about our marriage, then that meant she had already called him. And the walls were closing in. But I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't do any of the dramatic things people imagine themselves doing in situations like these. I just said. I already did what I needed to do. And I hung up. But the story didn't end there. Because 2 days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name, handwritten. Inside was a letter. Not from her. Not from him. But from his wife. And that's when everything took a turn I never saw coming. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. It had no return address, no logo, no typed label, just my name, handwritten in blue ink across the front. The handwriting was careful, almost too neat, like someone trying to mask the shaking of their own hands. I turned it over in my lap again and again, as if expecting some kind of warning or second thought to crawl out from the seal. But all I found inside was a folded sheet of white paper, and a letter that didn't begin with "Dear Lowell," or "Hello." No introduction. No name. Just 5 words. 5 that snapped me upright in the motel bed like I'd been jolted by electricity. I know what she did. There was no mistaking it. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't spam. And as I kept reading, I realized this wasn't someone guessing. This was someone who knew. Someone who had been watching from her own window while mine shattered from the inside. You don't know me. But I'm the one who shares a roof, and shared a bed, with the man who's been seeing your wife. Or at least he was until I read the texts. I paused, exhaling. The silence in the room felt heavier now. Thicker. Like I wasn't alone anymore, not physically, but emotionally. For the first time since everything imploded, I felt less like a victim and more like a witness in a courtroom where the other betrayed spouse had just taken the stand. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was being insecure, dramatic. I found earrings in his jacket pocket once. Not mine. Not my style. I asked about them. He said they were from a coworker who left them in the office. I nodded. I smiled. I pretended to believe him. She continued. Then I checked our phone bill. The same number, over and over, listed as work contact. I found hotel charges that didn't match any of his business trips. A weekend charge for a cabin rental upstate. When I confronted him, he cracked. Told me it was over. Said it was just a phase. He didn't say your wife's name. But he described her. I searched her name that night. That's how I found you. I felt cold. I looked at the window as if expecting someone to be watching. The idea that someone else had been following me while I was following the trail of my own wife's betrayal was surreal. This woman, this stranger, had been building her own puzzle while I was trying to glue mine back together. And then, her tone shifted. Her writing got sharper. I'm not writing this for closure. I'm writing because she's not done lying. I don't know if you're planning to forgive her. Maybe you're one of those men who needs to hold on. I'm not judging. I was her once. But I'm telling you, if you give her a second chance, she'll use it to bury the first. That line hit me in the chest like a punch. She knows how to cry at the right time. She knows how to twist it. She'll call it a mistake or a confused moment. She'll make you feel like the unstable one for needing space. She ended with something that shook me more than the confession itself. If you want proof, check the cabin rental next weekend. They booked it again. Under his name. Same location. Same time. It wasn't over when you left. She just got quieter. I sat back, the paper limp in my hands. It hadn't ended. Not after the letter. Not after my silence. Not after the texts. Not even after the call from the other man. She was still going. Still seeing him. Still risking everything. And I realized then that all this time, she hadn't been shocked by my goodbye letter because she felt guilt. She was terrified because I was inconvenient now. A complication. A loose thread in her new double life. And she had no idea I'd just been handed the scissors. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The letter from his wife sat on the table next to the motel lamp, still unfolded, still staring at me. I kept rereading it, as if expecting the words to change. As if hoping there had been some mistake. But no, the details were too specific. She knew. She knew. And she wasn't warning me out of pity. She was preparing me for war. At 5 a.m. I started driving. I didn't pack. Didn't eat. I filled the tank with the last of my cash, grabbed a stale gas station coffee, and followed the GPS coordinates she had scribbled at the bottom of the page. A secluded cabin near Belhaven Lake, listed under a rental service I'd never heard of. I didn't even know what I was going to do when I got there. I just knew I had to see it with my own eyes. The roads got narrower. Trees grew thicker. Civilization faded into the rearview mirror like a memory I didn't trust anymore. And then, after 2 hours and 3 wrong turns, I saw it. A gravel road with a rusted sign, Whisper Pines Retreats. It didn't look like a resort. It looked like a place you go when you want to be forgotten. Cabin 11 was tucked at the far end of the loop, half hidden behind a row of pines. There were no other cars nearby. Just hers. Her silver crossover with the dent in the back bumper I had paid to fix twice. Parked neatly. Like she wasn't doing anything wrong. I killed the engine and sat in silence. I wasn't there to break in. I wasn't there to make a scene. I just wanted to know. Because for some reason, some stupid, broken part of me, I needed to see if she looked happy. If she smiled for him the way she used to for me. If all those nights she came home tired and said she needed space, had really just been her building a new life without me. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then the door opened. She stepped out first. Wearing the same oversized sweater she used to steal from my side of the closet. She laughed. Threw her head back like she had no weight on her shoulders. And he followed, carrying a small bag in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. They looked like a couple on their 5th anniversary. Like everything was easy and light and clean. And just for a moment, just a flash of a second, I remembered our 2nd anniversary at a similar cabin, where I surprised her with a necklace and she surprised me with news that she was ready to start a family. It all felt like a cruel joke now. A recycled memory. She had taken what we built and repainted it with someone else's fingerprints. But then something happened I didn't expect. She stopped. She looked around like something had shifted in the air. And I swear, for a second, she looked right at my car. I ducked. Heart pounding. Breathing shallow. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. She stood still for a moment. Eyes narrowing. Then she turned to him and said something I couldn't hear. He nodded, glanced over his shoulder, and they both disappeared back inside. I stayed frozen. Not because I was scared. But because I realized something terrifying. She wasn't nervous. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. As if the idea of me still being somewhere nearby was nothing more than a fly buzzing at the edge of her perfect weekend. I didn't get out. I didn't walk up to the door. I didn't yell or cry or ask why. I left. But not before writing down every detail. Every second. Every expression. I wanted it burned into my brain, not for revenge, not even for closure. For clarity. Because the man who drove away from that cabin wasn't confused anymore. I knew who she was now. I knew that the love I gave wasn't just ignored, it was disposable. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. Not to hurt her. But to finally disappear in a way she'd never be able to undo. By the time I made it back to the motel, something inside me had settled. Not in a peaceful way, more like when a storm finishes wrecking a town and leaves only silence behind. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt emptied. But that emptiness, oddly enough, felt like freedom. I wasn't going to confront her. That fantasy had died at cabin 11. There would be no shouting match, no dramatic parking lot scene, no final argument where she wept and begged for understanding. The woman I saw that day wasn't confused. She was comfortable. She was thriving in the lie. And I finally understood that nothing I ever said to her would change anything she didn't already know. She knew she was destroying me. She just didn't care. That's when the idea hit me. I didn't want to fight for space in a house where I was already invisible. I didn't want to divide property or beg for my own socks in a court hearing. I didn't want her to get the satisfaction of knowing I was shattered. I wanted to vanish so cleanly that all she'd have left was the sound of her own voice echoing in an empty hallway. So I got to work. Over the next 48 hours, I wiped myself out of the story. I canceled the lease on our storage unit. I transferred what little I had left in my personal checking account to a new one she couldn't access. I called my boss and requested an unpaid leave, effective immediately. He didn't ask questions. I think he could hear it in my voice, that something had been broken that didn't grow back. I went back to the house one last time. Not when she was there. I waited until I saw a payment notification come in from that same cabin rental service again. She had booked it again. Not even a week later. I guess he was just part of her new lifestyle now. And me? I was just the opening chapter she'd rather skip. The house smelled like her perfume the second I stepped inside. It used to be a comfort. Now it made my stomach turn. I didn't take much, just what was mine, and only the things she never noticed anyway. A few shirts. My guitar. The photo album she never bothered to open. The one that had the picture of our wedding tucked between the pages like a pressed flower. I left the ring. Not in some dramatic gesture. Just quietly, in the drawer of her nightstand, next to the old love letters I once wrote her years ago, the ones she probably hadn't read in a decade. Then I left one last envelope. Not addressed to her. Addressed to the house. The life. The story I was choosing to close for good. Inside, I didn't write pain. I didn't write anger. I wrote clarity. You were the only person I ever let see the version of me who believed love could fix things. You mocked that. You manipulated it. You took everything gentle in me and mistook it for weakness. But I wasn't weak. I was loyal. And that's something you'll never understand. Don't look for me. Don't call. You already buried the version of me that would have picked up the phone. I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. And then I walked out of the house with no plan, no map, no destination. Just a full tank of gas, an aching chest, and the quiet realization that sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do, is walk away without slamming the door. But I should have known the story wouldn't end just because I was ready for it to. Because 2 weeks later, long after I disappeared, I got a call. From an unknown number. A woman's voice. Not hers. And what she told me made everything unravel again. The number came through while I was sitting on a bench outside a quiet roadside diner. I had been living in a tiny rented room above a bookstore in a town nobody really passes through on purpose. No one there knew me. No one asked questions. And for the first time in years, no one looked at me like I was someone else's shadow. I almost didn't answer. But something about the voice on the other end kept me frozen. She introduced herself as Naomi. She said she was the sister of the man my wife had been with. And her voice shook the moment she said, "I've read your letter. All of it." I blinked. "What do you mean, you read it?" Turns out, she had been staying with her brother briefly, after a tough divorce of her own, and stumbled across my letter. Not a copy. The letter. My wife had printed it out, apparently, trying to understand it. She left it in her bag. Naomi found it. And what she told me next I never expected. "I want to thank you," she said softly. "Reading your words was like looking into a mirror I didn't know I needed. You made me feel like I wasn't crazy for loving someone who kept using me to feel superior. Your letter, it made me leave. For real this time." I didn't say anything. My throat was tight. Not because I wanted gratitude, but because it hit me, something good had actually come out of all of this. My words, born from heartbreak, had helped someone find her exit. Someone else who had been made small and quiet for too long. We spoke for a while. Not about revenge. Not about the people who hurt us. Just about what came next. Life after silence. After betrayal. After disappearing. She recommended a therapist in her area. I told her about the bookstore. We laughed, awkwardly at first, then easier. And by the time we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since the first day I wrote that letter. Hope. Real, quiet, grounded hope. Weeks passed. Then months. My ex tried contacting me once, an email, sent late one night. The subject line said, "Just talk." I never opened it. I didn't need to. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I didn't hate her. But I also didn't belong in that story anymore. And that's the best part of this whole thing, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure from her. I gave myself the ending I needed. I wake up earlier now. I drink coffee slowly. I write sometimes. I even sent Naomi one of my pieces last week. She said it made her cry in a good way. And for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. I don't feel like I'm waiting to be chosen. I choose me. Now it's your turn, viewers. Has anything in this story reminded you of a moment in your own life? A letter, a silence, a choice? Tell us in the comments, we read everything. And don't forget. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where real stories hit harder than fiction. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.